Welcome to Time for Hope, a faith-based mental health program. Join our host, certified clinical mental health counselor and Christian psychotherapist Dr. Frida Cruz, and her guests as they discuss real-life issues and offer expert clinical advice and solid biblical application for any and all life situations. Now, here's the host of Time for Hope, Dr. Frida Cruz.
Thanks for joining me and my guest for today, author, professor of psychology at Virginia Commonwealth University, and I might add professional friend, Dr. Everett Worthington. And we're going to spend the next 2 weeks discussing his book titled Moving Forward, 6 Steps to Forgiving Yourself and Breaking Free from the Past. Weaving his own story of struggling with his brother's suicide and his overwhelming feelings of regret, together with psychological insight, scientific research, and biblical truth, Dr. Worthington and I will be discussing 6 steps found in his book that can ultimately lead to the full life that Jesus Christ promises we can have. Stay with us. And Ev, it's great having you back on Time for Hope. It's been quite a while.
It has been a few years, but I'm glad to be back.
Well, I think we're fortunate to get it, to pin you down long enough from all I'm reading and where you're going and what you're doing and so forth. But as I said in the introduction, we date back a long time, don't we?
We do.
Do you remember the first time, it was the second conference that AACC had in Charlotte, when we met.
That's
and
right, yeah.
I don't
and that was
remember
like 1994, I think.
Was it?
Yeah.
I've been trying to think what year that was.
Yeah.
We've had some good times, haven't we?
Yeah.
Across this country, going with AACC and watching it grow and come where it is today. Of course, when I speak of AACC, I'm referring to the American Association of Christian Counselors, and so it's good to see you again.
Yeah, you too.
Yes. Now, I knew about your mom. I knew about your mother's your mother being murdered. But I did not know, somehow or other, I missed out on the brother's suicide. I didn't know that till I had this book and started reading it.
Well, my mom got murdered back in 1996, and my brother Mike lived with depression and PTSD for about almost 10 years. And so his suicide happened really in 2005. So I didn't even realize that he was struggling with these things until about December of 2004. So, he lived in Knoxville, Tennessee. I live in Richmond, Virginia. And, we just didn't talk about those things.
Did you visit? What'd you talk about when you visited?
Well, we, every time I would get down to Knoxville, Mike didn't travel much, but every time I got down to Knoxville, we would go out to this all-you-can-eat Chinese buffet, and he and his wife and his son, and just have a good social time. But in 2004, I was down there for a mental health conference, and Charlene, Mike's wife, had a migraine, and his son had a basketball game, and so Mike and I went out and had really a nice, serious adult conversation, and that was really the best adult conversation I think we had ever had. And during that time, he did say how much he was struggling with depression, and he didn't understand what PTSD was, but as I heard him describing what was going on, I said, Mike, this sounds like post-traumatic stress disorder, and I think you need to get some help.
He would have none of that. Was that resentment?
Yeah.
I'm wondering, you were the older brother, right?
I was the older brother.
And was that resentment because of where you were and what you were doing? The way he answered you is in the book.
I don't really think it was resentment. I think it was more a product of our upbringing. My father was a railroad worker, and really didn't have much value on mental health professionals, and he kind of preached that to all of us, and I think Mike kind of adopted that. And so it was really just one of those attitudes that come out of our family background.
No, so then how did you end up with an interest in that area?
You know, I certainly had no idea that I was going to ever do this. I was a nuclear engineer. I had a master's in nuclear engineering. I was teaching nuclear physics in the Navy, and I became a Christian, and it really changed my worldview, and I wanted to spend time helping people directly instead of the more indirect helping route that I was using as an engineer. So that calling during my Navy time really led me to change fields and go back to school and get a doctorate in psychology.
And where was that from? I forgot.
That was University of Missouri at Columbia.
Oh, yes. Well, when you've already told some of your story, and of course, there will be viewers that didn't see you before talking about your mother's being murdered by a young burglar.
Right.
And so why don't you just tell a little bit about that, because it very much winds into the whole of this book.
Right. She was, I think, about 76, and I had gone to bed early on a New Year's Eve night, and a young man, perhaps two.
Yeah, I thought it was two, but I noticed that you did just really pin it down to one in the
Right.
book.
I mean, the details are unclear, although the police in Knoxville, Tennessee have opened the cold case, and they're pursuing two people now that might have been involved in this. But
has he been serving time since then?
On different charges. He was never really, although he made a confession, he retracted the confession because it did not happen under the right Miranda situation, and then the evidence that was available was not handled well, and so he could never be brought to trial. So he had been out, but had been involved in other crimes and had spent time in jail and in prison during the intervening years. So we knew about him, but he had claimed that someone else was with him, but there was no substantiation of that. But I think in this cold case, DNA evidence became available in Tennessee, and so you know, he still has not been charged with this. You know, and under our system, you're innocent until proven guilty. He's not even been tried. He's not even been charged. So I can't mention any names or anything like that.
I think of DNA and all that kind of stuff, and them not being able. I know some of what you feel, not nearly anything like what you feel with the loss of your mother in such a way. But I did lose a 19-year-old nephew that was murdered, and it hasn't been solved to this day. Right. So I know about that, not being able to see the person that did it punished. And as we talk about forgiveness and self-forgiveness, that doesn't keep us from wanting to see them pay for their crime. Would you agree with me on that?
Well, the way that I look at forgiveness and justice is that forgiveness happens inside of our skin, but justice is something that's social and societal. So if I forgive the person, which I did forgive the person, that doesn't take away the societal and the social responsibility that the person has. And, you know, I don't necessarily want to see him punished, but I want to see him placed in a position where he can't do this to someone else. And it seems clear from, you know, what's happened to him in the intervening years that he has not really changed his ways. He's still doing things that are illegal. So I think it is the wise societal decision, you know, if he can be brought to justice.
That's an interesting part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're really talking about is forgiving ourselves, and so we want to bring it all forward and pick up with your brother's suicide, because that's when, even though you had forgiven the perpetrator, whoever that was, and of the murderer of your mother, some things opened up with Mike's death that did not open up and with your mom's death.
So Mike, you know, discovered Mom's body, and she had been beaten to death with a crowbar and then violated with a wine bottle as she lay dying. And so, having seen that horrendous scene, and I just saw the aftermath. I, you know, went down to Knoxville and I saw the blood-splattered wall and the puddles of blood on the carpet. And that was traumatic enough for me. But he, having just seen her body, you know, was really upset. And so he just kept ruminating and playing this over and over in his mind. And when we had that dinner, he, you know, he got very upset. I think, you know, I'll tell more about that in just a few minutes.
I think we are coming up for a break, but it appears, as we go out, it appears that you took responsibility for Mike's death, or that there were things you could have done maybe to have prevented that. And I've kind of majored at sometimes in my counseling career with suicide. I actually opened a suicide center, and I've never seen a case of suicide where somebody didn't believe they could have done something to keep that person from committing suicide. But it opened up this book, actually, and a new world related to yourself, didn't it? So when we come back from break, that's where we want to pick up, and we will be right back. Why do you think, feel, and behave the way you do? Because of what you believe about yourself and others. Other factors include your own unique personhood, genes flowing down to you from generations past, and learned behavioral and emotional patterns modeled in your early home environment. The way you think and behave is largely determined by the way your parents thought and behaved, and the same was true for them. That is, until you develop an awareness that this is true and resolve to become your own individual and unique person, breaking the learned negative behavioral and emotional patterns. If you are aware of repeated self-defeating patterns that you can't seem to break, if you feel like that you are different from other people and that you don't measure up, if you lack a sense of belonging, always feeling like that you are on the outside looking in, if you are devoting your life to trying to please, control, rescue, protect, or change your spouse, children, parents, and others. If you continue to experience relationship abuse or failures, anxiety, depression, and fatigue, and if it seems you can never feel loved and accepted by God, no matter how hard you try, you need to take a very close look at all the things that have contributed to your being and behaving the way you are and do. Your beliefs about yourself have been precipitated by what was said to you, expected of you, done to you, or modeled for you, and you pulling it all together and drawing your own conclusion about yourself and your behaviors. Freedom will come when you, 1, face the reality of your present, not your past, life situations. 2, accept the truth that you don't have to remain in bondage to your past. 3, believe that God is willing and able to heal and deliver you from generational falsehoods which have been handed down to you. 4, seek professional help if you need it. 5, accept personal responsibility to change your thinking and behavioral patterns. 6, seek forgiveness for wounding others and forgive those who have wounded and abused you. And 7, believe God's word when it assures you that in relationship with His Son, you are loved and special in His family. Thanks for joining us on Time for Hope. My guest for today is Dr. Everett Worthington, and we're talking about his book, Moving Forward, subtitled 6 Steps to Forgiving Yourself and Breaking Free from the Past. That's a long one, so I had to kind of glance back down at the book, but it's chock full of directions, actually 6 steps that can help you break free of self-condemnation. And that's what we want to talk about. Self-condemnation and forgiveness. So the condemnation, did you immediately feel, you were in Europe when this suicide took place, and you got the message that your brother had committed suicide. And you had some time on your hands, and of course, did you immediately feel some responsibility that might have dated back to that conversation we talked about?
Well, I did. When we were notified the morning that he had committed suicide, I was immediately thrown into a kind of a chaotic state. I could flash back to the conversation we had where, I had urged him to get some help for his post-traumatic stress disorder, his depression, and he had rejected that idea. And as a psychologist, I have dealt with resistance from people to good suggestions for a long time, and we have ways of sticking with that and trying to help people get past their resistance. But I got triggered by some family dynamics. I slipped right back into that adolescent whatever type of attitude, and that was what really got to me when I heard about his suicide, that I had not behaved in a way that was consistent with my professional experience and training, but I had gone back to just adolescent family dynamics.
You mean after the suicide or before the suicide?
Well, when I was talking with him, I was triggered by that adolescent.
Because you say you have a tendency to back off and kind of retreat in certain situations, and do you think that played into that?
No, I think it was more that we just provoked each other in the same way we did when we were 16, and and I just, he's like, I don't want to hear your preaching about this. I don't want to go to counseling, and
And you said okay.
Yeah, I said, well, whatever, and I won't mention it, even though I knew I really should mention it, because he was pretty seriously.
And you never followed up on that conversation.
I didn't. Yeah, and so that is what I felt condemning of myself for, is that I had given up, and I had not done what I knew was the right thing to do. And I think this is, the way that self-condemnation usually starts. It either starts when we do something that we think is wrong, or when we don't live up to our expectations. And
was this a first-time thing for you, dealing with this self-condemnation?
You know, like everybody else, I have moments of things that I regret, but this is really the first time where I really was in a major way into self-condemnation, into the rumination, the just playing this over and over again and blaming myself. So it was by far the worst I'd ever gotten into, the self-condemnation.
So, because knowing you, I thought I would have thought, just the times that I've been around you and Kirby and other within groups, that you just had it all together, so to speak, and had worked out those kinds of things. But most of us, at some time or other, have to go back and start at ground one and work forward for this cleaning out that you're talking about, this self-acceptance and self-forgiveness. And it always takes us back to our family, our early home of origin. Don't you agree with me on that?
I do. And it definitely took me back there. It kind of thinking about, where did I come from? Why did I do this? How could I do things differently? All of those questions that I'm sure we all end up wrestling with when we're feeling self-blame. So
you say the first step you're laying out of these 6 steps is that it has to begin with God.
Right.
So when you think of or speak of beginning with God, what do you mean?
Well,
here you are. Your brother,
right.
your mom has been murdered. And you have actually threw you into researching forgiveness and teaching forgiveness and, of course, forgiving whoever murdered your mom and so forth. But then the brother commits suicide. So had in your struggles early on with forgiveness, did that start with God?
I think thinking about forgiveness really, of course, started, when I became a Christian. But I had done a lot of marriage counseling before, and so I got into forgiveness as soon as I started seeing couples and working with forgiveness and treating them and writing about it. And so I'd actually studied forgiveness scientifically and in the clinic for something like 10 years before my mom was murdered. But it changed the name of the game. It made it more personal once that happened. And then we continued our research there, and we started to research self-forgiveness actually before I had this encounter with Mike. We had already done 2 or 3 studies on self-forgiveness.
Had you done the REACH program?
We had done the REACH program starting in 1990.
That's 5 steps,
yeah.
yes.
So that's been going for 30 years or 25 years, and so lots of research on that.
Well, they're telling me that we're running out of time and until next week. So we've just mentioned the first of the 6 steps.
Right.
And then we want, of course, the REACH program, reaching for self-acceptance, reaching for self-forgiveness and the forgiveness of others and so forth. So we want our viewers to know that next week they'll get the meat, as it were, of your book on moving forward. I call it a cleaning out, and it sounds like that's what the process was that you went through. But any time that we need to make change, it must begin with God. Anything,
right.
If we're children of God or want to be a child of God or want to please God, it has to begin with Him, doesn't it?
Right.
he had to be the one to carry you through and sustain you through your mom's murder.
Yeah.
And now you're up against another tragedy in your family. So I can see that we would encourage our viewers, whatever they've gone through, whatever they're going through, they're not sufficient. And you say that in your book, not sufficient enough to handle it. It must be that they turn to the Lord, in their search for freedom. You agree with me on that? Then you just stay right there so we can turn around and take care of the rest of the story in your book and the rest of the steps, and have something to share with my viewers. I have a prayer request. Dear Dr. Frida, I want to rededicate my life to Christ. I feel like I pray and God doesn't hear. I want God to forgive and change me. Pray that I will be able to become the person that God wants me to be. And be assured that we have already taken this prayer request to our Heavenly Father. And if you haven't shared your prayer request with us, we encourage you to do so. And then I have a note of encouragement. Dear Dr. Frida, thank you for your program and for all you do, leading others to know Christ and praying for us. God bless you. I have learned a lot from you and your guests, Bible references and teaching. And what I want you to do next is consider whether or not the Lord would have you help us financially with this program, as we have expanded across the world, and there are expenses involved. And then make sure that you join us again next week for the second part of our sharing with Dr. Worthington on his book, Moving Forward. And this has to do with moving forward towards self-forgiveness.
A free fact sheet that contains additional information about today's topic is available upon request from our ministry. You can also receive a copy of today's resource for a contribution of any amount to the Time for Hope ministry. To receive our free fact sheet or our guest book, or both, you may call us at 800-669-9133. Write us at Post Office Box 2169, Spartanburg, South Carolina 29304. Or visit our website at timeforhope.org. When you call or write, prayerfully consider a donation to our ministry. Our ministry's mission is to offer hope to discouraged and hurting people. As we continue to give out messages of hope, a financial gift of any amount to support this ministry will be greatly appreciated. When you do this, you are joining us in offering hope to many viewers seeking help and hope for their situation. This will also enable us to inform and inspire some viewers to expand our mission, as they learn and in turn can minister more effectively to hurting people around them. To see this program again online, go to our website or search for Time for Hope TV on YouTube, iTunes, and Facebook. Until next time, have a great week. And remember, it is time for hope.